Today, we're going to look at the most horrific deaths caused by pranks. From a YouTube prankster shot with a fake gun to a wife who died from fright on Halloween night. On March 11, 2018, in Leeds, England, early evening temperatures hovered near 42 degrees Fahrenheit, with a steady breeze moving through the open sides of a multi-level driving range on the city's north end. The facility had 3 stacked floors of hitting bays, each with a waist-high guardrail and a 12-foot drop to the turf below. Bright overhead floodlights eliminated most shadows on the second level, where 4 friends had rented a bay. Among them was 22-year-old Kevin Turner, a warehouse worker who played golf only occasionally. The group checked in at 7:04 p.m., ordered food, and took their place in the bay. Security footage later showed they weren't intoxicated. They had a shared pitcher of beer and sodas, and none appeared impaired. What the footage does show is a pattern. The group spent much of the night pranking each other. Light taps with clubs, mock shoves, quick nudges from behind. Witnesses later reported seeing the same behavior throughout the evening. Kevin mostly ignored the antics. Between swings, he scrolled through his phone while his friends teased him. At 7:36 p.m., 2 other groups arrived in neighboring bays, adding more movement along the shared walkway. Visibility remained strong under the bright lamps above each mat. At 7:41 p.m., Kevin stepped forward for another shot. He stood close to the edge, less than a foot from the drop, and leaned slightly over the barrier while talking to the others behind him. One friend, Daniel, walked up with a drink in one hand and a club in the other. Daniel later explained it was meant to be another quick scare, similar to small pranks he had pulled earlier that night. A gentle shove to startle Kevin before he swung. He said he had done the same thing earlier with no issues. Security cameras recorded Daniel approaching, speaking briefly, then extending his hand toward Kevin's upper back. Footage shows the contact was brief and not forceful, but enough to disrupt his stance. Kevin's shoes slipped on the smooth hitting mat, and he lost balance instantly. His momentum carried him forward over the guardrail. A witness below said the fall happened so fast, he only saw a blur before impact. Kevin struck the turf head first, landing on the right side of his neck and shoulder. The witness shouted for assistance as staff members on the ground level ran toward him. The fall occurred at 7:41 p.m. Staff reached Kevin in under 40 seconds. He was unresponsive, with shallow, irregular breathing. Employees followed protocol by keeping him still, monitoring his airway, and relaying observations to emergency services. Paramedics arrived at 7:52 p.m., stabilized Kevin, and transported him with CPR ongoing. He was pronounced dead at 8:37 p.m., the result of a catastrophic cervical spinal cord injury. Police found no intoxication or fight, but classified the shove as a reckless prank, given the elevated ledge and slick mat. The coroner ruled the death a misadventure, caused by a sudden action in a hazardous position. On June 23, 2018, in Quezon City, Philippines, late afternoon traffic moved steadily along Tandang Sora Avenue. At 5:40 p.m., the temperature was around 86 degrees Fahrenheit, and the air was humid. The commercial strip was busy with people leaving small shops, lining up for jeepneys, and walking toward nearby side streets. Motorcycles, tricycles, and delivery trucks added constant background noise. Visibility was good, though the lowering sun cast long shadows across the pavement. Among the crowd was Ray Mendoza, a 21-year-old small YouTube content creator who was filming with 2 friends. Ray ran a channel with 5,000 subscribers focused on prank content, including staged hold-up pranks where he pretended to rob strangers using toy weapons. Before quickly revealing the joke, the group had already recorded several clips earlier that day. Ray wore a black hoodie and jeans, and carried a plastic prop pistol painted entirely black, with no markings to show it was fake. The group used a handheld camera and a phone mounted on a stabilizer to capture reactions from passers-by. Both devices recorded footage, which investigators later recovered. Earlier pranks that afternoon involved jumping out of alleyways or tapping someone's shoulder before showing them the toy gun. Witnesses later said most reactions were brief moments of confusion or annoyance. followed by Ray immediately explaining that it was a prank. People walked away without further incident. At 6:02 p.m., the group moved toward a narrow side street beside a local store. Investigators later noted that the low lighting in the alley reduced Roberto's ability to distinguish the toy gun from a real firearm. A few residents stood near the corner, talking casually. A motorcycle was parked about 15 feet from the entrance. Standing near the motorcycle was 48-year-old security guard Roberto, heading home after his shift at a nearby warehouse. He was dressed in civilian clothes but carried his licensed firearm in a waist holster. Several residents later said Roberto regularly passed through that area at the end of the day. Ray did not know Roberto was armed. At approximately 6:05 p.m., Ray walked into the alley holding the fake gun at his side. His two friends stayed farther back to record from different angles. Camera footage shows Ray moving quickly toward Roberto from a distance of about 10 feet. The heavy traffic noise from the main road masked his footsteps. Ray raised the prop gun and pointed it toward Roberto as he stepped forward. Some witnesses reported hearing him say something, but the exact words were unclear because of the surrounding noise. From Roberto's position, Ray looked like a man approaching with a real firearm. Footage from the store's CCTV showed Roberto stepping back immediately. He reached for his waist holster as Ray continued to move toward him. The entire sequence, from the moment Ray lifted the prop weapon to the gunshot, lasted under 3 seconds. Roberto fired once at close range. The bullet struck Ray in the upper chest. Ray fell backward onto the pavement, and the toy gun landed beside him. People near the store moved back quickly, and several residents called for help. Roberto placed his firearm on the ground and raised his hands, asking someone nearby to call the police. Ray's friends ran toward him, dropping the camera. The recovered audio captured their attempts to check his breathing and call for immediate assistance. Ray showed minimal movement and became unresponsive shortly after. Emergency responders arrived at 6:14 p.m., provided initial care, and transported Ray to a nearby hospital. The toy gun was collected as evidence. Investigators noted it had no markings indicating it was fake. Roberto cooperated with police immediately. Witness statements, CCTV, and the prank footage confirmed that Ray approached holding what appeared to be a real firearm. Prompting Roberto to perceive an imminent threat, Ray was pronounced dead shortly after arrival, the cause being a single gunshot wound to the chest. Police ruled the shooting self-defense, noting the realistic prop gun, low lighting, and fast pace of the encounter. On September 2, 2017, just outside Kalispell, Montana, early evening settled over a quiet rural highway. The two-lane road cut through dense stretches of pine and aspen, their tall outlines shifting slightly in the cool 48 degrees Fahrenheit air dusk had darkened the tree line. And with no streetlights, the only illumination came from passing headlights sweeping across the narrow 3-foot shoulder. The ground beside the pavement sloped into damp grass holding moisture from the morning, with uneven dirt and scattered rocks beneath it. Along this dim stretch walked 36-year-old Doug Lanley, a seasonal hunting guide familiar with the terrain. He was not scouting that evening. Doug had recently purchased a full ghillie suit, camouflage designed to blend into natural surroundings, and wanted to test it as part of a prank inspired by local Bigfoot sighting stories. He planned to crouch near the roadside and startle drivers with small movements. He chose a spot about 6 feet from the pavement and settled into the damp grass. The burlap, netting, and foliage-like strips of the suit blended him into the brush. His plan was simple: create a slight motion, let passing drivers notice, and later tell friends about the reactions. Doug wore sturdy boots and gloves, and his car was parked about 50 feet down the road. A cooler and a bag sat on the shoulder beside it. He intended to remain low until a vehicle approached, and he placed no warning lights or markers nearby. 2 vehicles traveled in the same direction along the road, a pickup truck carrying 2 teenagers and a sedan following several car lengths behind. Both maintained speeds near the posted 35 to 40 miles per hour limit. With the fading light, Doug's suit blended easily into the surrounding vegetation, making him difficult to detect. At approximately 7:18 p.m., the pickup neared Doug's location. Doug rose slightly and shifted closer to the shoulder to create movement. As he adjusted his stance, his right boot pressed onto a slick patch of grass covering loose soil. The surface dipped under his weight, causing his foot to slide several inches. Investigators later confirmed the slope and moisture created unstable footing. The slip pushed Doug closer to the pavement than planned. The pickup driver later reported seeing movement near the brush and assuming an animal might step out. As Doug rose higher, the driver instinctively swerved left. Doug, already off balance, tried to steady himself, but stepped onto another uneven patch where a small rock rolled beneath his boot. Investigators concluded the shifts in footing pushed him directly toward the lane. Doug's right side struck the pavement's edge as the pickup's fender and side mirror made contact with his shoulder. The impact threw him fully into the roadway, where he landed partially on his back and side. Within seconds, the sedan behind the pickup entered the curve. Its driver saw a figure lying in the lane and braked hard, but the distance was too short at that speed. The sedan struck Doug with the front bumper, adding further injury. Witnesses from both vehicles later stated they saw a camouflaged figure emerge from the shoulder, stumble, and then get hit twice in quick succession. The entire sequence occurred in less than 5 seconds. Emergency services arrived within minutes and found Doug unresponsive with severe head trauma, fractures, and internal injuries. Investigators noted that the 6-inch shoulder drop, wet grass, and uneven footing contributed to his slip toward the roadway. Tire marks and damage on both vehicles confirmed the sequence of impacts. Doug was pronounced dead at the scene. The coroner ruled the cause of death blunt force trauma, and police classified the incident as an accidental result of the roadside prank. On October 31, 2015, in a quiet rural area outside Murfreesboro, Tennessee, the Rose farmhouse sat at the end of a long, unpaved driveway. The house was a single-story wooden structure with aging siding, drafty windows, and a narrow front porch. A single porch bulb provided the only light. The temperature hovered at 41 degrees Fahrenheit, and the air was dry and still. No trick-or-treaters came that far out, but a few plastic pumpkins and a small broom decoration hung near the door as part of the Rose simple Halloween setup. Inside, 58-year-old Delilah Rowe moved through her evening routine. She had finished cleaning up after dinner and was preparing to turn off the lights and lock the doors. She had lived in the farmhouse with her husband, Tom, a 62-year-old, for many years, settling into predictable patterns of rural life. Delilah was generally healthy, but had a history of fainting when startled. Tom, finishing chores in the barn earlier, found an old white Halloween mask stored with other seasonal items. Thinking it would be a lighthearted joke for the holiday, he put on the mask and an oversized jacket. He planned to knock on the front door and wait for Delilah to open it, expecting nothing more than a brief scare followed by a laugh. He stepped onto the dark porch and knocked at 9:53 p.m. A neighbor who lived about 100 feet away later said the knock carried clearly on the quiet Halloween night. Delilah approached the door, unlocked it, and cracked it open. The porch light illuminated the hollow eyes of the mask. The reaction was immediate. She took a quick step backward, but her right foot slid on a thin patch of moisture near the inside threshold. Condensation tracked in earlier from the cold air. As she moved back again, her heel caught the raised wooden lip of the doorway. The combination of the slippery spot, the backward motion, and the sudden startle caused her to lose balance. She fell onto the wooden porch, striking her left side before rolling onto her back. Porch camera footage later confirmed the fall happened less than a second after she recognized the mask. The neighbor reported hearing a sharp thud, followed by Tom shouting her name. Tom pulled the mask off immediately and knelt beside her. Tom later told investigators that her breathing was shallow and uneven, and she did not respond when he tried to lift her shoulders. At 9:57 p.m., he called 911 and stayed beside her until help arrived. Emergency responders reached the farmhouse within 7 minutes. They found Delilah unresponsive. With only minor abrasions from the fall, paramedics noted an irregular pulse. Paramedics initiated advanced resuscitation and transported her to the hospital. Medical staff determined that Delilah had experienced a catecholamine-triggered arrhythmia. a sudden disruption of heart rhythm caused by a high surge of stress hormones. In her case, the abrupt fright, combined with her known susceptibility to fainting, progressed into ventricular fibrillation, a rhythm in which the heart quivers instead of pumping blood effectively. Despite medical treatment, Delilah died later that night. Authorities reviewed porch footage and statements from Tom and the neighbor. They concluded Delilah died from a stress-induced arrhythmia triggered by the Halloween prank, with her fall causing only minor injury. The death was ruled accidental, and no charges were filed. Local advisories later warned about the risks of sudden startle pranks. It was March 18, 2016, Davao, Philippines. The morning sun beat down on a small grassy backyard behind a modest home, making the day hot but dry. Carlos Ramos, 32, a local farmer, and his friend Miguel Santos, 29, were finishing their morning chores and relaxing, joking about farm animals and wildlife. Both men were healthy, strong, and active. Nothing about the day suggested danger. Neither man realized the situation carried real risk. A villager had discovered a recently killed king cobra. Measuring nearly 8 feet stiff but not fully relaxed, the snake's muscles still held enough tension to react if provoked. Out of curiosity, Carlos and Miguel examined it. The tension between playfulness and risk was thin, and Carlos suggested what he thought would be a harmless joke. Toss the dead snake at Miguel and enjoy a laugh. At 10:15 a.m., Carlos lifted the snake to swing it toward his friend. As he shifted his grip, his thumb pressed the muscles near the snake's jaw. That pressure triggered a post-mortem reflex, causing the jaw to clamp briefly. The fangs punctured Carlos's hand and forearm before he released it. The puncture was small, but it delivered a potent dose of neurotoxic venom. Witnesses described the scene as chaotic. Miguel and his neighbors initially thought Carlos was exaggerating the pain, unaware of how quickly the venom would act. Within several minutes, Carlos became dizzy and weak, and his breathing started to shallow. The neurotoxic effects progressed quickly, consistent with a high-potency cobra bite. Medical staff and toxicology notes later explained that cobra venom is primarily neurotoxic, affecting the nerves that control movement and breathing. Once injected, the toxins interfere with communication between nerves and muscles. Paralysis can begin within several minutes and progress rapidly, especially without immediate antivenom. Carlos's symptoms escalated quickly. His speech slurred, his coordination vanished, and his body weakened as the neurotoxic effects continued to intensify. Friends and neighbors tried to keep him conscious and calm, but the venom advanced faster than they could respond. By the time he was transported to a local hospital, staff noted that the neurotoxic effects were already affecting his breathing and other critical functions. Medical staff administered supportive care and prepared antivenom, but the speed of the bite and the rural delay proved fatal. Despite their efforts, Carlos Ramos succumbed to neurotoxic envenomation, a tragic outcome resulting from a combination of a misjudged prank, residual reflexive snake movement, and a fast-acting venom consistent with large cobra species. Authorities classified the death as accidental. Miguel provided a full statement, confirming that Carlos had intended the act as a joke and that the reflexive bite occurred instantly. No criminal charges were filed. The incident became a cautionary tale for the community, and local officials issued advisories warning that even dead venomous snakes can still deliver functional bites. Safety protocols were updated to prevent similar incidents. On January 1, 2019, in Aurora, Colorado, early evening traffic moved steadily along commercial areas on the city's south side. The weather was clear and cool at 54 degrees Fahrenheit, with streetlights providing good visibility. At the wide multi-lane intersections, drivers headed home from stores and restaurants, and traffic remained moderate. Around 7:30 p.m., a red SUV carrying 3 teenagers traveled west through the area. The driver, 14-year-old Joshua Thompson, had taken his family's vehicle without permission. His 2 friends, Brian and Philip, sat in the back. Earlier that evening, the group had been throwing eggs at passing cars to film reactions for social media. Witnesses later reported seeing them laughing and leaning out the window to hit vehicles that passed close to the SUV. During one of these passes, an egg struck the side window of a sedan, whose driver had just pulled out from a small commercial parking lot. Surveillance footage from nearby businesses showed the sedan slowing briefly before turning to follow the teens. The sedan accelerated to close the gap, and Joshua increased speed in an attempt to get away. Both vehicles moved unpredictably as they traveled across multiple lanes. Witnesses said the chase continued for several blocks as the SUV weaved repeatedly through traffic. The teens eventually approached a major intersection where westbound lanes met a larger arterial road. Traffic signals controlled all directions. The light for Joshua's approach was red. At the same time, 30-year-old Jackie Brown was traveling southbound through the intersection in her silver sedan. With the right-of-way, other motorists later said traffic in her direction was moving normally under the steady green signal. Dash cam footage from a vehicle several cars behind Jackie captured the moment the red SUV entered the intersection at high speed. Estimated at roughly 45 to 50 miles per hour, Joshua did not brake. Drivers stopped in the cross-traffic lanes had no time to react as the SUV crossed against the signal. Jackie's sedan entered the intersection at a consistent speed. The SUV struck the driver's side in a lateral impact, pushing her vehicle into a rotation before it slid to a stop angled across the southbound lanes. The SUV came to rest near the opposite curb. Several motorists pulled over and called emergency services. Witnesses approached the vehicles and reported limited or no movement inside the silver sedan. The SUV's occupants exited quickly. Brian and Philip ran toward the sidewalk while Joshua remained near the vehicle with a phone in his hand. First responders arrived within minutes. Paramedics assessed Jackie and found her unresponsive. The sedan showed significant intrusion along the driver's side. Consistent with a high-speed side impact, fire personnel used tools to reach her and remove her with caution. Police separated the teenagers and gathered statements from Joshua, Brian, and Philip. Witness accounts supported the sequence of events: eggs thrown at passing vehicles, a driver reacting by pursuing the teens, and Joshua running a red light while attempting to flee. Officers noted that the pursuing sedan had no contact with either vehicle. Jackie Brown was transported to a nearby hospital, where she was pronounced dead. The medical examiner listed her cause of death as blunt force trauma from a lateral collision. Investigators concluded the fatality resulted from the teen SUV entering the intersection at high speed against a red signal. Joshua Thompson admitted to throwing eggs earlier in the evening and accelerating when the sedan began following them. Investigators noted that the egg-throwing prank set off the chain of events that led to the high-speed red light violation and the fatal collision. Joshua was detained and later charged under juvenile statutes related to negligent homicide and unauthorized use of a motor vehicle. It was March 15, 2016. In a small Riverside, California studio, the camera faced a cramped kitchen corner where synthetic curtains skimmed an old baseboard heater and paper towels leaned beside a bottle of cooking oil. Eve Hollowell, 22, split her time between classes and a customer service job. Friends called her calm and agreeable, the kind of person who volunteered to hold the light when someone else had an idea. Alistair Holloway, 24, worked nights moving freight and poured his off hours into short online videos. He was confident, impulsive, and convinced that the next clip would be the one that stuck. They were a couple filming together, chasing a moment. The prop was simple: a can of aerosol deodorant and a cheap lighter. Alistair told Eve he wanted to do a quick flash of flame as a harmless scare for the camera, just a brief trick to make her jump. He assured her the flame would stay small. The window was shut, the fan off, the extinguisher non-existent. Eve's blouse was light polyester, loose at the sleeves. Her hair had hold from an earlier spray. The tripod was set so the frame caught them both from only a few feet away. Nothing about the space forgave heat. What happened next was later reconstructed from the camera that continued recording in the corner of the room. The first press of the nozzle met flame and turned into a bright cone, roughly 3 to 4 feet long. In a tight room, that distance vanished. Eve flinched, surprised. The flame was far larger than what Alistair had claimed it would be. The plume skated forward and climbed. The blouse ignited with the fast plastic edge of synthetic fiber. The melting fabric shrank and adhered to skin. Her hair flashed over. She moved backward into the counter. Hip knocking the oil bottle, Alistair dropped the lighter and grabbed a cotton dish towel, pressing at the fire that clung and spread. The alarm screamed. The towel charred and failed. He tossed a small pot of water in panic. The splash struck the hot, oily surface and flared, lifting heat and smoke into the space. The air turned black and bitter. Eve's sleeves and torso showed advancing fire. Her hands struck at the flames, the skin already darkening in the heat. Smoke rolled up into the ceiling, thick and toxic from synthetics. Investigators later reviewed the footage frame by frame to verify the sequence and confirm what the camera captured. Her knees buckled. There were rasping breaths, soot streaking the skin around her nose and lips. The room dimmed with soot. The camera still recording neighbors pounded down the hallway, and someone shouted for help. A call for responders went out as the remaining flames consumed what they could and dwindled into hot, smoky patches. Fire crews forced the door and hit hotspots. Paramedics lifted Eve and moved fast. Full-thickness burns mapped her face, neck, arms, and chest, where fabric had melted and stuck. Airway injury was evident. Harsh sounds, swelling from superheated gases and toxic smoke. An advanced airway was attempted, but the damage was severe and immediate. She lost pulses shortly after removal from the unit. Despite aggressive airway management and fluid resuscitation, Eve went into cardiac arrest en route to the hospital. The combination of airway swelling and full-thickness burns left medics with no viable intervention. The medical examiner later confirmed her death was caused by inhalation injury and extensive full-thickness thermal burns. Fire investigators reviewed the footage and confirmed the ignition occurred during a prank in which Alistair attempted a quick flame scare for the camera. Alistair was charged with involuntary manslaughter and received 3 years in prison after pleading guilty. The building dried out with fans. Soot stained the ceiling. Warnings went up about aerosols and ignition. A life reduced to a small apartment's distances, 3 or 4 feet of flame, a few strides to the counter, a door just beyond thickening smoke. The story closed with paperwork, a cause listed as clothing ignition during an improvised prank, and a reminder that heat, fuel, and oxygen do not forgive showmanship. It was August 22, 2017. Interstate 285 cut through Atlanta's evening rush, 6 lanes of steady traffic moving at highway speeds. Alexander Fox, 35, spent his days investigating insurance claims, documenting accidents, and calculating risk. The work had made him cautious by nature, methodical in his approach to danger, but divorce papers and a recent move to Georgia had left him questioning everything, including the careful boundaries he'd built around his life. His teenage nephew had driven down from Tennessee with friends for a family barbecue. The kid was 17, loud, and convinced that his uncle had become boring since the separation. The idea started as a prank that his nephew and his friends were planning for their social media page. They told Alexander that traffic on the nearby stretch of Interstate 285 had been slowed to a crawl because of lane closure work, and that stepping onto the shoulder would be safe for a quick joke video. They positioned themselves with their phones ready, intending to film his reaction when he realized they had exaggerated the empty lanes. Alexander had been drinking beer in the heat. His judgment felt loose, his usual risk assessment clouded by alcohol and the sting of being called predictable. Wanting to prove he was not uptight as they claimed, Alexander believed them when they said the highway was mostly stopped anyway. In reality, only a single maintenance truck was parked farther down the shoulder, something the teens pointed at to sell the prank. Beyond the hill, traffic was still moving at full interstate speed. The location was a straight stretch where traffic crested a hill about 200 yards away, limiting sight lines for approaching drivers. At that distance, drivers had no more than 2 seconds to register his presence and react, far below the time needed to stop safely at highway speed. His leather dress shoes had smooth soles, wrong for running on hot asphalt. Believing the prank about slowed traffic, Alexander stepped off the shoulder, expecting only a few slow-moving cars. He accelerated across the nearest lane, narrowly avoiding a sedan. His footing slipped slightly at the lane marker, costing him a crucial second. A tractor-trailer in the second lane swerved hard, its air brakes hissing, which caused vehicles behind it to brake suddenly. He reached the third lane as traffic crested the distant hill. The approaching vehicles had maybe 2 or 3 seconds to react when he appeared in their path. A pickup truck in the 4th lane locked its brakes, ABS chattering against the pavement, but physics had already taken over. The impact occurred at roughly 45 miles per hour. Alexander's body was thrown 30 feet forward, striking the asphalt and tumbling across painted lane lines. The collision triggered a chain reaction of crashes behind the initial impact. His pelvis showed obvious instability, and both legs were deformed. Paramedics noted abdominal distension consistent with internal bleeding. Bystanders waved frantically to slow oncoming traffic, while his nephew called for help. Emergency responders faced gridlock trying to reach the median where Alexander lay bleeding. His skin grew pale as shock set in from massive internal injuries, despite attempts to control external bleeding. The damage was too extensive. Paramedics found only faint agonal respirations and a weak pulse that faded during initial treatment. Despite CPR and rapid trauma care, they could not restore circulation. The medical examiner later confirmed that Alexander died from massive internal bleeding, caused by blunt force trauma. The highway stayed closed for hours while crews cleared debris. Alexander's ex-wife later created a small mental health foundation in his name. The truck driver required counseling after the collision. What began as a family gathering ended in yellow tape, and reports documenting how personal pain and peer pressure overrode years of caution. Investigators later confirmed that Alexander entered the roadway after being misled into thinking traffic had been slowed for construction, a prank his nephew admitted was never meant to push him into real danger. The case was classified as an accidental death, and the nephew faced a reckless endangerment charge for setting up and recording the prank that led Alexander into the lanes. It was December 7th, 2015. The downtown subway platform buzzed with evening commuters as trains rumbled through tunnels beneath Manhattan. Grace Montgomery, 16, balanced her time between track practice and classes at a Queens high school. She was fast, competitive, and tired of being dismissed by classmates who saw her as too serious, too focused on grades and athletics to be interesting. 2 older students had cornered her near the platform edge during the ride home. They were 17 and 18, the kind who filmed staged reaction clips for their social media accounts. They told Grace they wanted a quick joke video where she would pretend to run alongside a departing train for a second, so they could edit it later to look like subway surfing. Grace wore her school uniform and carried a heavy backpack loaded with textbooks. Her shoes had minimal grip, designed for hallways rather than moving trains. The platform was crowded enough to provide cover, and commuters were too focused on their phones to notice the 2 older classmates crowding Grace near the yellow safety line. Grace believed she was only supposed to jog beside the train for a brief moment, not actually grab onto it, and the older students kept their phones raised to film the prank. The tunnel between stations stretched nearly a mile through darkness, lined with signal equipment and electrical hazards. The 3rd rail carried 625 volts of direct current, enough to stop a heart instantly. Clearances were tight, designed for trains rather than human bodies clinging to their exteriors. When the downtown express began pulling away, Grace ran alongside the accelerating cars. Her hands found the rear coupling mechanism, and she pulled herself onto the narrow maintenance platform at the back of the last car. The train quickly reached 35 miles per hour as it entered the tunnel. The 2 older classmates stayed behind on the platform, recording until the train disappeared into the darkness. They later told investigators they expected her to stop after a few steps and had no idea she would actually grab onto the train. After 30 seconds, the train hit a curve, and Grace felt her backpack catch on something solid. The impact jerked her sideways, and she lost her grip with her left hand. Now she hung by one arm while her feet dragged along the track bed, her shoes scraping against the ballast stones and rail edges. Footage later showed her struggling to pull herself upward as the tunnel clearance narrowed ahead. Her strength was failing, her palms slick with sweat. The grip gave out completely, and she fell between the tracks, her body striking the electrified 3rd rail. 625 volts of direct current surged through her body, causing immediate cardiac arrest and rigid muscle contraction. Her body stiffened from the electrical current, then collapsed off the rail into the track bed once the contact broke. Transit workers located her during a post-run inspection approximately 12 minutes later. The power had to be shut down across the entire subway line before emergency responders could safely enter the tunnel and extract her body. Grace was pronounced dead at the scene from electrocution and severe electrical burns. Her family later filed a claim alleging inadequate safety measures, prompting a review of tunnel access and security practices. What started as a staged prank, meant to capture a harmless reaction clip, ended in a tunnel designed for machines, not teenagers navigating split-second decisions. Grace's instinct to push herself took over at the worst possible moment, turning a staged prank into a deadly encounter with a tunnel built for machines, not people. Transit police reviewed security footage and witness statements, confirming the incident as an accidental electrocution during subway surfing. The two older students were charged with reckless endangerment for staging the prank and misleading Grace into believing she only needed to run beside the train. It was June 18, 2018. The remote highway bridge stretched across a Colorado canyon, 200 feet above rocky terrain and a fast-moving river. The canyon walls were narrow in several sections, leaving little clearance if a climber swung sideways on a rope. Jasper Kincaid, 28, made his living teaching outdoor recreation at an adventure company near Colorado Springs. His expertise lay in rope work, safety protocols, and risk management. Colleagues knew him as meticulous, someone who triple-checked anchor points and never cut corners when lives were on the line. 4 college friends had driven up from Denver for Jasper's birthday weekend. They were celebrating at a campsite when someone suggested filming a light-hearted reaction clip as a joke gift. The idea was simple. Jasper would lean forward over the bridge with a rope tied to him, while the others pretended he was about to do a full bungee jump. The friends were enthusiastic, but inexperienced, and the prank quickly grew sloppy as alcohol and teasing pushed the setup forward. Jasper initially refused. His professional training screamed warnings about using climbing rope for anything resembling a real jump. He agreed only after they repeatedly told him the rope was meant to support just a short, controlled lean for the joke video, not an actual drop. He trusted his climbing expertise even as his instincts warned him about the improvised setup. But the teasing escalated, pushing the prank further than Jasper was comfortable with. His friends called him hypocritical, pointing out that he made a living from dangerous activities. They accused him of becoming too cautious, forgetting how to have fun. The alcohol clouded his judgment, and eventually, his resistance cracked. They secured a long length of dynamic climbing rope to the bridge's steel guardrail, using multiple anchor points. Jasper tied the other end around his ankles, only because he believed he would be leaning over the edge for a few feet, not dropping into the canyon. The bridge stood 180 feet above the canyon floor, far farther than he realized the rope had been measured for. The fall began before Jasper realized the setup had shifted into something far more dangerous than the prank he agreed to. Jasper fell freely for 150 feet, about 3 seconds of fall, reaching roughly 65 to 67 miles per hour before the rope went tight. But when the rope reached its limit, there was no gradual deceleration. Instead of stretching smoothly like a bungee cord, the climbing rope snapped taut with devastating force. The force spike was far beyond what the temporary guardrail bolts were designed to handle. Although several guardrail bolts deformed and one anchor plate bent under the load, the multi-point rig held long enough for the rope to transfer a catastrophic shock through his body. The sudden stop snapped through his lower legs and drove a massive compression force up his spine. The sudden stop swung him violently in a pendulum arc, slamming him into the canyon wall. On the second impact, his head struck a rocky outcropping with sickening force, fracturing his skull and causing immediate brain trauma. His friends watched the rope jerk violently, then saw him hanging motionless far below, partly obscured by the canyon's narrow walls. They had no proper lowering system, no rescue training, and no way to safely retrieve him. Their celebration had become a nightmare. The rescue took 45 minutes. Search and rescue teams had to rappel from the bridge using proper equipment, while Jasper remained suspended, unconscious, and bleeding. By the time rescuers reached him, he still had a faint pulse but showed no signs of consciousness. He lost pulses shortly after being lowered to the canyon floor, and paramedics could not restore circulation. He was pronounced dead on the scene due to catastrophic trauma. The medical examiner later confirmed that Jasper died from massive blunt force trauma, including spinal fractures, internal hemorrhage, and severe head injury. Sheriff investigators determined that the climbing rope used for bungee jumping created forces far exceeding safe parameters, with non-rated anchor points contributing to the fatal outcome. Jasper's friends were charged with reckless endangerment for staging the prank and misleading him into believing the rope was only meant for a brief lean over the edge. It was April 3rd, 2016. Spring break had arrived in Tampa, giving Blair Rodriguez a rare week away from teaching 7th grade science. At 42, she was known for making chemistry fun and safe in the classroom, though at home those habits sometimes softened. Her 8-year-old daughter was restless, and Blair decided to entertain her with a dramatic backyard experiment after seeing online tutorials of simple, fizzing pool chemical reactions. That morning, her daughter had watched a kid's prank video involving mystery ingredients and secretly labeled several containers with playful names to surprise her mother. Blair agreed to try their own version, believing the labeled ingredients were safe, kid-friendly household materials. Without checking the containers closely, she unknowingly set up the table using her own commercial-strength pool chemicals, which had been placed in the mislabeled containers. Wearing only safety glasses and treating the activity as a lighthearted prank for her daughter, she handled the materials far more casually than she ever would in her classroom. She crushed several chlorinating tablets and funneled them into a 2-liter plastic bottle before carefully adding muriatic acid. The reaction began immediately, generating chlorine gas and intense heat. The bottle walls bulged and whitened from internal pressure as the exothermic reaction accelerated beyond her expectations. The bottle was already swelling, its plastic whitening and crackling under strain. A sign of imminent failure that would have warned any trained chemist, Blair leaned closer to observe the dramatic changes, her face directly above the increasingly unstable container. Within seconds, the bottle burst violently under pressure, more a rapid rupture than an explosion, sending a caustic spray across the table, striking her face, neck, and chest, causing immediate chemical burns. A pale, yellow-tinged chlorine plume drifted from the reaction site, the sharp odor spreading toward the pool area. Blair stumbled backward, coughing violently as the gas seared her airways. Her breathing grew increasingly labored as airway swelling and spasms set in, leaving her disoriented and struggling to stay upright. Her safety glasses had deflected some of the spray, but they offered no protection against the chlorine gas. She tripped at the pool's edge and fell into 4 feet of water, surfacing once with frothy sputum, an early sign of acute lung injury. The swelling in her airways made each breath ineffective, and the violent coughing left her too weak to keep herself above the water. Her daughter called for help, while a neighbor heard the commotion but kept his distance as the sharp chlorine odor reached his yard. Blair submerged again, her airway injury and violent coughing leaving her too weak and short of breath to keep herself above the water. Emergency responders staged at a safe distance until hazmat teams could ventilate the area. When they finally reached Blair, she had been underwater for several minutes. Despite aggressive resuscitation efforts, the combination of drowning and severe chemical inhalation proved fatal. What began as a lighthearted backyard prank meant to make her daughter laugh ended in a scene marked by hazmat suits and caution tape. Blair's confidence in her chemistry knowledge led her to overlook the danger of using concentrated pool chemicals for what she assumed was a harmless stunt. Fire investigators determined the cause as accidental chemical mixing, resulting in toxic gas production and container failure. The incident highlighted the dangers of using commercial-grade chemicals without proper safety protocols. It was October 11th, 2017. Seattle's skyline stretched endlessly beneath a construction crane, 40 stories above the bustling streets where morning commuters hurried past without looking up. Elias Harlow, 31, had built his career around capturing moments that others couldn't reach. His social media following of 500,000 people knew him for dramatic photography, taken from impossible angles, each image more daring than the last. Elias worked as a freelance photographer, but his real passion was extreme urban exploration. He planned every shot carefully, studying structures and calculating risks, and his audience followed him for dramatic images taken from dangerous heights. The 40-story building under construction offered a perfect sunrise backdrop over Seattle. Elias had checked the weekend schedule and knew security would be light, giving him a narrow chance to capture a selfie with the city 400 feet below. Earlier that week, 2 friends had joked about a viral prank trend where people leaned over high ledges to mimic extreme confidence. As part of the joke, they told Elias that construction workers had already tested the temporary lifeline cable on the 40th floor, and that it could handle a person's weight for a quick pose. They said it was part of the trend to make the stunt look reckless while actually being safe. Elias believed them, treating the tip as harmless reassurance rather than realizing it was just part of their prank. Weather made the setup risky. 25-mile-per-hour winds cut between towers, and fog left the steel slick with condensation. Safety barriers were minimal, and several scaffold platforms and exterior hoists jutted from different floors, creating hazards along the building's outer frame. Elias brought professional camera equipment and a selfie stick, but no fall protection gear. He had grown confident from years of successful shoots, trusting his experience to keep him safe. The building's temporary lifeline cables looked secure enough to provide a handhold, though they weren't rated for human loads. He climbed to the 40th floor as dawn approached, positioning himself on a steel beam that extended 3 feet beyond the building's edge. The dramatic overhang would create the perfect frame for his shot, with nothing but empty air and the city plaza far below. The first few shots went smoothly. He positioned himself in the exaggerated forward, lean the meme required, angling his body outward to mimic the prank-style pose meant to look reckless but controlled. Elias found his rhythm, leaning back confidently while maintaining balance on the narrow beam. But Seattle's unpredictable wind patterns created sudden gusts that channeled between surrounding towers with surprising force. A sudden cross-gust caught his jacket and shifted his center of gravity just as he was adjusting his camera angle. The temporary lifeline cable he was gripping was secured with a basic clamp, not rated to hold a person's weight, and it began pulling away from its mounting bracket under his weight. Elias dropped his selfie stick and grabbed desperately for the steel beam, but his hands were cold and couldn't maintain a grip on the wet metal surface. He fell backward off the beam, tumbling through 400 feet of empty air toward the concrete plaza below. During the fall, his body struck construction equipment and scaffolding, altering his trajectory and adding further blunt trauma before the final impact at approximately 90 miles per hour. The security guard arriving for his morning shift discovered the scene within minutes. The medical examiner later documented extensive blunt force trauma, multiple fractures, internal organ rupture, and skull base fracture consistent with a fall from a height exceeding 400 feet. Elias's camera equipment had fallen separately and lay scattered around his body, the memory card still containing the final images he had captured. Investigators noted that the final images on his camera matched the staged leaning pose he attempted while relying on the temporary lifeline cable he believed was safe to grip. Detectives interviewed his friends, who admitted the false reassurance about the cable had been meant as a harmless prank, leading investigators to classify their involvement as careless but not criminal. What began as a lighthearted attempt to recreate a trending prank pose ended with investigators reconstructing his fall from scattered camera evidence. They ruled the death an accidental trespass fatality, prompting developers to add permanent safety barriers. It was March 15, 2017, when what started as an innocent birthday surprise at a Phoenix office building turned into a deadly nightmare that would forever change how we think about workplace pranks. Travis Coleman, a 28-year-old accountant, was known throughout his financial services company as the quiet, methodical type who preferred spreadsheets to small talk. His colleagues often joked that Travis treated every calculation like a life-or-death situation, never knowing how prophetic those words would become. What they didn't know was that Travis carried a dangerous secret. He suffered from hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, a heart condition that made his heart muscle abnormally thick and prone to deadly rhythm disturbances. The prank wasn't meant to ignite anything. The 3 younger employees had modified store-bought novelty fireworks, the kind that flash and crackle without open flame, and rewired them to light up and pop without real combustion. They believed it would look dramatic but harmless, producing loud bangs and flashes through LEDs and audio playback. What they didn't realize was that even these low-voltage pyrotechnic effects produced intense noise and flashes that could trigger panic, and in Travis's case, a deadly cardiac shock. They'd smuggled in consumer-grade fireworks and modified novelty pyrotechnics with flashing LEDs, items that were never intended for indoor use and which violated building safety rules. They positioned security cameras throughout the break room on the 12th floor, expecting to capture Travis's hilarious reaction for their social media followers. Travis had mentioned several times that he hated surprise parties and loud noises due to his anxiety, but his co-workers dismissed this as typical antisocial behavior. They decorated the break room with balloons and streamers, setting the stage for what they thought would be harmless entertainment. When Travis was led into the break room that afternoon, 15 co-workers shouted surprise as he approached the seemingly innocent birthday cake. The moment he leaned forward to blow out the candles, the hidden device activated with multiple loud explosions, blinding flashes and small fireworks going off simultaneously. The extreme shock was too much for Travis's compromised heart. The sudden surge of adrenaline triggered ventricular fibrillation, causing his heart to quiver uselessly instead of pumping blood. Within seconds, his face turned blue as blood flow to his brain stopped completely. But here's where the tragedy became even more horrific. His co-workers thought he was playing along with the prank. For several critical minutes, they laughed and filmed his collapse, assuming his apparent distress was just an elaborate performance. Travis clutched his chest and collapsed, his breathing becoming irregular gasps as his brain was starved of oxygen. By the time someone realized something was genuinely wrong and called for help, precious minutes had already passed. Emergency responders arrived and immediately began CPR and defibrillation attempts. After 20 minutes of advanced cardiac life support, they managed to briefly restart his heart, but the prolonged lack of oxygen had caused severe brain damage. Travis's heart stopped again in the ambulance, and he was pronounced dead from sudden cardiac death due to ventricular fibrillation. The 3 pranksters were charged with involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to prison terms ranging from 2 to 4 years. The company faced millions in wrongful death lawsuits and implemented strict anti-harassment policies. OSHA investigators later cited the firm for unsafe handling of pyrotechnic materials within a workplace, noting multiple lapses in supervision and safety compliance. The break room where Travis died was permanently closed and converted into a memorial space. His family established a foundation promoting awareness of hidden heart conditions in young adults, hoping that Travis's death might prevent similar tragedies. This case serves as a chilling reminder that what seems like harmless fun can have deadly consequences when medical conditions and human psychology are ignored in the pursuit of viral entertainment. It was July 4th, 2016, when a 4th of July pool party in Malibu turned from celebration to catastrophe, claiming the life of a young woman whose trust in friends would prove fatal. Megan Holt, a 24-year-old graphic designer, was the kind of person who said yes to everything. Her adventurous spirit and infectious enthusiasm made her the life of every party, always willing to try the craziest dares or most outrageous challenges. She had been a competitive diver in high school, which gave her confidence around water that would tragically work against her that night. The party was hosted at a luxury home where guests were engaging in increasingly dangerous dares as the alcohol flowed freely. By midnight, several guests had jumped from the deck into the shallow end and started filming blind dares for social media, egging each other on as the dares got riskier. Megan had been drinking for hours, her judgment clouded by celebration and peer pressure. The host's brother had devised what he thought was the ultimate prank, a blindfolded trust dive that would give participants the scare of their lives. The elaborate setup involved partially draining the pool to around 3 or 4 feet of water and using underwater lighting to create the illusion of full depth. In daylight, the concrete bottom would have been easy to spot, but the combination of dim lighting, alcohol, and clever placement of colored LEDs made the pool appear deceptively deep. A few guests joked that the water seemed lower than usual, but no one questioned it once the lights went on. The host's brother had arranged the draining earlier in the day with a portable pump and turned on the lights only after dark, ensuring few guests noticed the lowered water level. Multiple party guests gathered around with phones ready to record what they expected would be a hilarious moment when Megan discovered she was diving into shallow water. They positioned her at what appeared to be the deep end, assuring her she was standing over 8 feet of water. Megan was blindfolded with a thick towel and spent several minutes psyching herself up for the dive. Her high school diving experience kicked in as she prepared for what she believed was a standard pool dive. The wet concrete deck provided no safety mats or warnings about the dangerous conditions below. When Megan finally launched herself forward in a perfect racing dive, her head and neck struck the concrete bottom with tremendous force. The impact immediately fractured her cervical vertebrae at the C5 to C6 level, causing instant quadriplegia, as her spinal cord was severely compressed and damaged. The sharp, shallow splash drew a few laughs. It sounded odd, but under the music and laughter, no one registered what it meant. The most horrifying aspect of this tragedy was that Megan remained fully conscious, but completely paralyzed from the neck down. Unable to lift her face out of even 2 feet of water, she began drowning while her friends continued laughing and cheering, thinking her lack of movement was part of an elaborate joke. For nearly a full minute, party guests filmed and celebrated what they believed was Megan playing along with the prank. Someone joked that she was holding her breath too long. Then the water clouded red. That was the moment the laughter stopped, and the horrible reality became clear. By the time they pulled her from the pool, she had aspirated significant amounts of water and lost consciousness. Emergency responders arrived to find a young woman whose promising life had been cut short by a prank that ignored basic physics and human anatomy. Despite immediate CPR and advanced life support, Megan was pronounced dead from drowning secondary to catastrophic spinal cord injury. The homeowner and his brother faced criminal negligence charges and served jail time. The family's wrongful death lawsuit was settled, but no amount of money could bring back their adventurous daughter, whose trust had been so callously betrayed. Friends later admitted they had brushed off her hesitation to join the prank, assuming Megan, of all people, could handle anything. This tragedy sparked local safety campaigns and renewed calls for stricter pool safety regulations at private gatherings. It also fueled national conversations about the deadly consequences of viral prank culture. Megan's death serves as a permanent reminder that water and concrete don't care about your intentions, only physics matters. It was October 31st, 2015, when a Halloween prank at a Seattle office complex turned a routine maintenance check into a deadly nightmare that would expose the fatal consequences of workplace pranks gone wrong. Randy Tucker, a 35-year-old building maintenance supervisor, was the kind of man who took safety seriously. After 15 years working in high-rise buildings, he had developed an almost obsessive attention to detail that had prevented countless accidents. His methodical approach to elevator inspections had earned him commendations from building management, but it also made him the perfect target for what 2 security guards thought would be a harmless Halloween scare. Randy had one weakness that few people knew about. He suffered from mild claustrophobia. Years of working in confined spaces like elevator shafts had taught him to manage his fear. But the anxiety was always lurking beneath his professional exterior. The confined space of an elevator car, especially when something went wrong, could trigger intense panic responses. The security guards had spent weeks planning their elaborate Halloween prank. They rigged elevator car number 7 with hidden speakers and planned to trigger terrifying sounds of cables snapping, grinding metal, and emergency alarms when Randy was inside performing routine maintenance checks. They hid small, battery-powered speakers above the elevator's removable ceiling panel and triggered the sound effects remotely from the security desk, a crude setup that left no obvious physical tampering visible to maintenance. They timed the prank during routine morning testing hours, when elevator noises and alarms wouldn't draw attention from other staff. They thought it would be hilarious to watch the usually calm maintenance supervisor jump out of his skin. That Halloween morning, Randy was scheduled to inspect elevators throughout the 40-story building. His usual partner had called in sick, leaving him to work alone, a violation of safety protocols that would prove fatal. When Randy entered elevator 7 on the 23rd floor to check the mechanical systems, he had no idea he was walking into a carefully orchestrated trap. The security guards activated their prank, filling the confined space with extremely loud sounds of catastrophic mechanical failure and emergency alarms. The effect on Randy was immediate and devastating. His claustrophobia was triggered instantly by the combination of confined space and terrifying sounds. What started as manageable anxiety exploded into full-blown panic as his mind convinced him the elevator was actually failing. In his panicked state, Randy frantically pressed the emergency stop button and tried to force open the elevator doors. His extreme panic response caused severe hyperventilation, leading to respiratory alkalosis that made him dizzy and disoriented. While attempting to escape what he believed was a deadly situation, Randy slipped on his own sweat and fell backward, striking his head hard against the metal control panel. The impact caused a basilar skull fracture and immediate subdural hematoma. As blood began pooling inside his brain, Randy lost consciousness within minutes, but his brain continued to swell as intracranial pressure increased. The elevator remained stopped between floors, and the prank sounds continued for several more minutes before the security guards realized something had gone terribly wrong. By the time building maintenance accessed the elevator and found Randy unconscious, critical time had passed. Emergency responders arrived to find a man whose dedication to safety had been turned against him by colleagues who thought fear was funny. Randy was pronounced dead from severe traumatic brain injury and increased intracranial pressure. The two security guards were convicted of involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to prison terms. The building management company faced fines and wrongful death claims. Randy's widow established a scholarship fund for elevator technician training, ensuring that his commitment to safety would live on. His death prompted renewed attention to elevator maintenance safety and stricter oversight within the industry. It was August 12, 2018, when a trust-building exercise on an Austin highway overpass became a deadly lesson in the physics of human deceleration, claiming the life of a young woman whose faith in her friends would prove tragically misplaced. Jolene Parks, a 22-year-old restaurant server and psychology student, was known for her unwavering trust in others and her determination to overcome personal fears. Despite her terror of heights, she had recently committed to facing her phobias head-on, posting about her journey of self-improvement on social media. Her trusting nature and desire for personal growth made her the perfect target for what her college friends believed would be an unforgettable bonding experience. The four friends had convinced Jolene that they had arranged a legitimate bungee jumping experience from an 85-foot highway overpass that had once been used by licensed bungee companies during special events. What Jolene didn't know was that her friends had substituted professional bungee equipment with a 60-foot static climbing rope, planning to give her the scare of her life by stopping her fall much shorter than expected. The friends had purchased legitimate climbing harnesses online and spent considerable effort making their setup appear professional. To disguise the substitution, they covered the static rope with bright elastic tubing and colorful sleeves, so it visually resembled an elastic bungee line. They assured Jolene that everything was properly inspected and certified, exploiting her trust and her limited knowledge of extreme sports equipment. The climbing rope they used was rated for static loads, but had zero elasticity, a crucial difference that would prove fatal. Standing on the bridge railing 85 feet above the busy highway, Jolene spent nearly 15 minutes working up the courage to jump. Her friends encouraged her, filming what they expected would be a hilarious moment when she realized the fall was much shorter than anticipated. They had no understanding of the deadly physics involved when a human body traveling at high speed is suddenly stopped by an inelastic rope. When Jolene finally jumped, trusting completely in her friends' assurances about safety, she fell freely for exactly 60 feet before the static climbing rope reached its limit. At that moment, she was traveling at approximately 43 miles per hour when the rope brought her to an instantaneous stop. The sudden deceleration created forces far beyond what the human body can withstand. While her harness held perfectly and the rope performed exactly as designed, the extreme deceleration forces tore through her internal organs like a wrecking ball. Her aorta, the body's main artery, ruptured instantly under the tremendous stress, causing massive internal bleeding. Jolene remained conscious for about 30 seconds, hanging 25 feet above the highway, but was already in severe shock from the internal trauma. Passing motorists immediately called for help after witnessing the fall, but the damage was already done. Emergency responders used specialized rescue equipment to reach her position, but despite their best efforts, Jolene was pronounced dead from traumatic aortic rupture and internal hemorrhaging. The very trust that defined her personality had been weaponized against her by friends who confused physics with pranks. All four friends were charged with involuntary manslaughter and received prison sentences ranging from 8 to 12 years. The incident prompted local officials to tighten enforcement of existing extreme sports regulations and permanently close the bridge to public access. Jolene's parents became advocates for adventure sports safety, ensuring that their daughter's death would serve as a warning about the deadly difference between professional equipment and amateur assumptions. This tragedy stands as a permanent reminder that trust is sacred, physics is unforgiving, and the combination of the two can be lethal. It was November 3, 2017, when a seemingly harmless prank at a Denver Community College chemistry lab created a toxic cloud that would claim the life of a dedicated student whose commitment to safety became his downfall. Cale Morton, a 19-year-old chemistry student and lab assistant, was the kind of person who read safety manuals for fun. His serious approach to laboratory protocols had earned him the position of student safety monitor, making him responsible for ensuring proper handling of all chemicals. Cale suffered from mild asthma, a condition he managed easily with a daily inhaler, never imagining it would make him vulnerable to a deadly chemical reaction. 3 classmates had grown tired of Cale's constant safety reminders and decided to teach him a lesson through what they thought was a harmless prank. Their plan was simple: switch the labels on cleaning supply bottles to confuse him during his evening inventory work. They swapped ammonia labels onto bleach containers and vice versa, expecting to watch Cale panic when he discovered the apparent mislabeling. The pranksters had no understanding of basic chemistry. They didn't realize that mixing bleach and ammonia creates chlorine gas, a deadly chemical weapon used in World War I that can kill within minutes in confined spaces. Their ignorance turned the small storage room into a sealed pocket of toxic air. That evening, Cale was conducting a routine inventory of cleaning supplies in the small chemical preparation room. As the dedicated safety monitor, he took his responsibilities seriously, ensuring every chemical was properly stored according to strict protocols. When he discovered what appeared to be improperly labeled containers, he immediately began following standard procedures to correct the situation. Following proper safety protocols, Cale began transferring liquids to appropriate containers based on what he believed were the correct labels. When he poured what he thought was ammonia into a container he believed held bleach, the 2 solutions mixed and immediately began producing chlorine gas. The toxic yellow-green cloud filled the small preparation room within seconds. Crucially, the prep room's ventilation had been shut off for overnight maintenance, leaving the small space poorly ventilated and allowing the gas to concentrate dangerously fast. Cale's first breath of the gas caused immediate chemical burns to his respiratory tract and triggered a severe asthma attack. The combination of toxic exposure and acute bronchospasm caused his airways to constrict, while the gas continued burning his lung tissue. Within a minute, Cale became dizzy and disoriented from oxygen deprivation. His asthma inhaler was completely ineffective against the chemical-induced bronchospasm. He began coughing up blood-tinged foam as his lungs filled with fluid from the chemical burns. Cale attempted to reach the emergency exit, but collapsed after taking several steps. His body was shutting down as the toxic gas destroyed his respiratory system from the inside. The very dedication to safety that defined his character had led him directly into a death trap created by classmates who thought chemistry was a joke. A night security guard making routine rounds discovered Cale and immediately called emergency services while dragging him from the contaminated room. Paramedics arrived and provided immediate respiratory support, but the damage was already catastrophic. Cale was pronounced dead from acute chemical pneumonia and respiratory failure, complicated by his pre-existing asthma condition. The 3 students responsible were charged with criminally negligent homicide and received prison sentences ranging from 3 to 6 years. It was June 18, 2016, when a Miami apartment building rooftop became the scene of a deadly stunt that would expose the fatal consequences of social media culture and misplaced trust in amateur safety equipment. Bethany Rhodes, a 26-year-old social media coordinator, lived and breathed superhero movies. Her apartment was filled with comic book memorabilia, and her Instagram feed constantly featured posts about overcoming fears and living life to the fullest. Her trusting nature and enthusiasm for new experiences made her the perfect target for what her 3 roommates believed would be the ultimate viral video opportunity. The roommates had convinced Bethany they could create an amazing superhero flying experience using what they claimed was professional stunt equipment. They planned to film her swinging between their 12-story apartment building and the adjacent 8-story parking garage, with the 18-foot gap seeming manageable with proper equipment. Bethany had no experience with stunt work, but her roommates assured her they had researched everything thoroughly. What Bethany didn't know was that her roommates had purchased a standard climbing harness and rope online, then anchored it to a decorative roof fixture never designed to support human weight. The metal ventilation cover they chose was held in place by standard screws driven into the roof decking, adequate for covering ventilation equipment, but completely inadequate for the dynamic forces created by a human body in motion. They'd accessed the rooftop through a maintenance hatch they'd found unlocked, and the decorative vent secured only by lightweight screws was never rated for dynamic human loads. The roommates had spent hours setting up their equipment and camera angles, convinced they were creating the next viral sensation. They fitted Bethany with the legitimate climbing harness and connected it to the climbing rope that was properly rated for her weight, but only when anchored to appropriate mounting points designed for such loads. Standing at the edge of the 12-story rooftop, Bethany felt excitement and nervousness as her roommates filmed what they expected would be a safe and spectacular swing to the parking garage. She trusted completely in their assurances about the safety preparations, never questioning the anchor point that would determine whether she lived or died. When Bethany jumped from the rooftop, the decorative anchor point immediately failed under her 140-pound dynamic load. The standard screws pulled straight out of the roof decking, sending her into a completely uncontrolled fall toward the concrete courtyard below. Bethany fell freely for 8 stories, approximately 96 feet, before striking the concrete courtyard at roughly 55 miles per hour. She impacted the ground feet first, with the tremendous force completely shattering both legs and her pelvis. The massive impact energy traveled upward through her body, fracturing her spine in multiple places and causing catastrophic internal injuries. Her femurs were driven upward into her torso, puncturing vital organs and causing massive internal bleeding. Death occurred within minutes from traumatic shock and internal hemorrhaging, though she briefly remained conscious after the impact. Witnesses in the courtyard immediately called emergency services after hearing the devastating impact. Emergency responders arrived to find a young woman whose dreams of viral fame had been crushed by the unforgiving laws of physics. All 3 roommates were charged with criminally negligent homicide and sentenced to prison terms ranging from 7 to 10 years. The building's management later faced multiple wrongful death lawsuits for failing to implement adequate rooftop safety barriers and access controls. The incident prompted Miami officials to require special activity permits for rooftop stunts and tighten rooftop access enforcement citywide. Bethany's family created a foundation promoting social media responsibility and educating young people about the dangers of viral stunt culture. This tragedy serves as a permanent reminder that physics doesn't care about your follower count. It was October 31st, 2017, in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Plano, Texas. The evening air was cool, and moisture from earlier dew left a slick sheen on roofs and outdoor surfaces across the area. 19-year-old Nora Quinn was spending Halloween night alone at her family's 2-story colonial home while her parents attended a neighborhood gathering. A college freshman studying communications, Nora was known by friends as cautious and responsible, often preferring quiet evenings to large social events. The house sat on a peaceful cul-de-sac lined with mature oak trees that partially blocked the streetlights, creating uneven visibility across the property. Her 22-year-old brother worked in retail management and had a reputation for elaborate pranks among his friend group. That evening, he convinced 2 co-workers to help execute what they considered a harmless Halloween scare. The brother later told investigators that he never imagined Nora would think the intrusion was real. Using his spare key to the family home, the 3 young men entered through the back door while Nora was upstairs in her bedroom. The group moved through the darkened house carrying flashlights, deliberately opening drawers and cabinets to simulate the sounds of intruders searching for valuables. They tapped on windows from the inside and created footsteps in the hallway. According to police statements given later, the brother expected Nora would quickly realize it was a prank. Upstairs, Nora heard the unfamiliar sounds and saw moving lights through her bedroom door. Genuinely believing burglars had entered the house, she immediately called emergency services and barricaded herself in her bedroom closet. The recorded call captured her whispered reports of intruders moving through the house, along with audible sounds of doors opening and muffled voices. As the sounds seemed to move closer to the stairway, Nora made the decision to escape through her 2nd-story bedroom window. She climbed onto the composite shingle roof, which had become slippery from the evening's moisture accumulation. Evidence at the scene suggested she had attempted to reach a low-hanging oak branch, approximately 6 feet from the roof's edge. Police responding to her emergency call later documented wet sock prints near the windowsill and visible water beading on the roof surface. As Nora attempted to reach the tree branch, her right foot lost traction on the damp shingles. She slid toward the edge and fell approximately 18 feet, landing directly on the concrete driveway below. Patrol officers arrived roughly 4 minutes after the initial call and discovered Nora unconscious on the driveway. Dispatch logs showed a patrol unit was already passing through the neighborhood for Halloween safety checks, which shortened the response time. Inside the house, they found her brother and his friends removing their masks, having realized something had gone wrong when they heard sirens approaching. Paramedics pronounced Nora dead at the scene. The medical examiner determined that she had suffered a basilar skull fracture and severe brain trauma, consistent with a high-impact fall onto concrete from a significant height. The investigation included analysis of the emergency call recording, crime scene measurements, and police body cam footage that documented the wet roofing conditions and the open bedroom window. Her brother faced charges of reckless endangerment and involuntary manslaughter. The case highlighted the unpredictable consequences of pranks designed to frighten, particularly when the target believes they are facing genuine danger and responds with survival instincts. It was March 15, 2018, during spring break at a beach house rental in Gulf Shores, Alabama. 8 college students had gathered for their annual week-long vacation, with temperatures reaching a warm 78 degrees Fahrenheit, under clear skies and moderate humidity levels. 23-year-old Ramona Davies was a pre-medical student known for her disciplined lifestyle and meticulous health habits. Friends described her as someone who maintained strict dietary routines and exercised daily, often declining junk food in favor of protein smoothies and morning runs along the beach. She had a tendency toward dehydration during physical activity. Medical notes from her campus clinic later confirmed she had previously shown borderline electrolyte levels after long workouts. Her roommate worked in campus food services and had developed a mischievous streak over their years of friendship. The roommate later admitted to investigators that she believed Ramona had become too rigid in her habits and decided to play what she considered a harmless prank by secretly adding nearly a full bottle of magnesium citrate solution to Ramona's morning protein smoothie. According to her statement to police, her intention was to cause embarrassing digestive issues during their planned beach volleyball activities. The morning began routinely with the group preparing for outdoor games on the sand. Ramona consumed her usual breakfast smoothie before joining the volleyball match, playing energetically for over an hour in the direct sunlight and coastal wind. The physical exertion caused significant sweating, which would later prove medically relevant. Within a few hours of consuming the adulterated drink, Ramona began experiencing severe abdominal cramping. This progressed to profuse diarrhea and repeated vomiting episodes as her body reacted to the large quantity of osmotic laxative. Initially, she attempted to rehydrate using plain water, but her condition continued deteriorating. By mid-afternoon, witnesses observed Ramona becoming increasingly disoriented and complaining of heart palpitations. Her friends, unaware of the prank, assumed she was experiencing normal digestive upset and did not seek medical attention. They later told police they assumed she had food poisoning from the previous night's takeout. The combination of the laxative effects, previous dehydration from exercise, and inability to retain fluids created a dangerous physiological situation. Emergency medical services were eventually called when Ramona collapsed in the beach house bathroom. Paramedics found her with rapid, irregular pulse patterns. Their cardiac monitoring equipment recorded ventricular tachycardia that quickly degenerated despite initial treatment attempts. During transport and emergency department care, medical staff initiated intravenous fluid replacement and advanced cardiac life support protocols. Laboratory tests revealed severe electrolyte imbalances, particularly low potassium levels, along with metabolic acidosis consistent with massive fluid loss. Despite aggressive resuscitation efforts, including multiple medications and electrical cardioversion, Ramona suffered cardiac arrest and could not be revived. The medical examiner concluded her death was consistent with severe dehydration and electrolyte collapse, triggered by the large dose of osmotic laxative. The investigation revealed the roommate's involvement when she admitted to adding magnesium citrate to the smoothie. Physical evidence included text messages and an empty laxative bottle found in the kitchen trash. Criminal charges were filed against the roommate for actions contributing to the death. The case demonstrated how seemingly minor pranks involving substances can have fatal consequences when combined with environmental factors. It was August 22, 2016, in Phoenix, Arizona. where afternoon temperatures reached 112 degrees Fahrenheit under relentless sun. Closed vehicles sitting in direct sunlight measured between 130 and 150 degrees inside, especially those with dark-colored trunk compartments that absorbed heat rapidly. 20-year-old Bastian Stone worked at an electronics retailer in a busy shopping mall and was known among co-workers for his playful nature and love of practical jokes. His colleagues often described him as someone who enjoyed surprising people with harmless scares. He also had a habit of checking his car trunk repeatedly, worried about potential break-ins. What his co-workers didn't know was that the trunk's internal release cable had recently begun sticking intermittently, something Bastian had noticed but had not yet repaired. His co-worker, who managed inventory at the same store, decided to turn Bastian's trunk-checking habit into what he believed would be a harmless prank. He planned to hide inside the trunk and jump out when Bastian ended his shift, expecting the whole thing to last only 10 to 15 minutes. Previous playful jump-scare pranks among the team had gone smoothly, which made him think this one would be just as harmless. During the afternoon shift change, while Bastian remained inside helping customers, the co-worker used Bastian's habit of leaving his car unlocked during work hours, a practice multiple employees later confirmed. With the vehicle accessible, he climbed into the trunk of Bastian's dark-colored sedan parked in the employee section of the mall lot. The car had been sitting in full sun exposure for hours, and the trunk's temperature continued rising as the metal surfaces absorbed heat. Store records showed that a complicated customer issue extended Bastian's shift far longer than expected. Meanwhile, the trunk's interior reached dangerously high levels. As temperatures climbed, the co-worker attempted to adjust his position inside the confined space. Forensic inspectors later determined that this movement likely worsened the sticking release cable, making it difficult or impossible to activate from inside. After roughly 40 minutes in the superheated compartment, he began showing signs of severe heat exhaustion. Rising heat overwhelmed his body's ability to regulate temperature. Early confusion, dizziness, and dehydration set in quickly, impairing his ability to recognize or use the emergency handle. By the time Bastian finally walked to his car and opened the trunk, the co-worker was semi-conscious, with hot, dry skin and shallow, rapid breathing. Witnesses saw Bastian immediately call for help and attempt to cool him. Emergency medical services arrived within minutes. Paramedics recorded a core body temperature above 105 degrees Fahrenheit and began aggressive cooling procedures. Despite rapid transport, ice pack cooling, and advanced life support efforts at the hospital, the prolonged exposure had already caused irreversible damage to multiple organ systems. He was pronounced dead less than an hour after being found. The medical examiner determined the cause of death as heat stroke resulting from confinement in an overheated vehicle compartment. Vehicle forensics confirmed that the trunk's release cable showed signs of intermittent mechanical sticking, consistent with a partial jam. Investigators concluded that the co-worker likely attempted to escape, but could not activate the compromised mechanism, with heat-induced confusion further limiting his ability to respond. The incident underscored how quickly enclosed vehicle spaces can become lethal during extreme heat, and how even simple pranks can turn fatal when mechanical failures and environmental conditions intersect. It was April 12, 2015, at a downtown office building in Seattle, Washington. The overcast morning brought temperatures of 52 degrees Fahrenheit with light rain. The 15-story structure housed multiple businesses and maintained strict security protocols. 26-year-old Annika Lowe worked as a marketing coordinator on the 8th floor and had been employed there for nearly 3 years. Medical records later revealed she had a documented history of panic disorder and took daily medication that could affect heart rhythm. Colleagues described her as diligent and detail-oriented, though she sometimes appeared anxious during stressful situations. Her co-worker in the same department had grown frustrated with monotonous office life and decided to create excitement through an elaborate prank. According to his confession to federal investigators, he believed calling in a fake bomb threat would result in a routine building evacuation, giving everyone an unexpected day off. His plan involved using an anonymous internet calling service. Investigators later described him as socially naive, with no real understanding of how seriously bomb threats are treated. During the mid-morning hours, building security received the threatening call claiming a bomb had been placed on the 8th floor with a 20-minute detonation timer. Emergency protocols were immediately activated throughout the facility. Security personnel began floor-by-floor evacuations, directing all occupants to use stairwells exclusively, while elevators were automatically disabled. Floor wardens quickly organized the evacuation process, guiding employees toward the emergency stairwells. The narrow staircases became crowded as hundreds of people from multiple floors began descending simultaneously. Witnesses later reported that Annika appeared visibly distressed upon hearing the bomb threat announcement. As Annika began descending the packed stairwell, several people noticed she was breathing heavily and had become noticeably pale. The combination of the emergency situation, crowded conditions, and her underlying anxiety disorder created physiological stress. Her heart rate likely increased dramatically in response to the perceived life-threatening situation. On the 5th floor landing, Annika suddenly collapsed among the crowd of evacuating employees. A fellow tenant who witnessed the collapse immediately retrieved an automated external defibrillator from a nearby emergency station. The AED detected an unstable rhythm and advised a shock. Hospital records later confirmed it was torsade de pointes. 2 electrical shocks were delivered by the AED, while other evacuees performed chest compressions. The evacuation continued around the medical emergency, as building protocol required clearing all floors before emergency responders could safely enter. First responders reached Annika after the affected floor was completely cleared, causing a brief but critical delay in advanced medical care. Despite continued resuscitation efforts and transport to the hospital, she could not be revived. The medical examiner determined the cause of death as sudden cardiac arrest resulting from a stress-induced malignant heart rhythm. Her anxiety medication could prolong electrical conduction in the heart, making her vulnerable to dangerous arrhythmias during extreme stress. The investigation traced the anonymous call through internet service records back to her coworker, who faced federal charges for making false bomb threats resulting in death. The case demonstrated how pranks designed to create panic can have fatal consequences for individuals with underlying medical vulnerabilities. It was June 3, 2019, at a construction site in Denver, Colorado. The clear evening maintained comfortable temperatures around 71 degrees Fahrenheit, with excellent visibility as daylight gradually faded. The active apartment construction project featured a 12-foot deep utility excavation surrounded by standard orange safety fencing. 31-year-old Tobias Fox served as a site supervisor and was known throughout the construction industry for his meticulous attention to safety protocols. Co-workers respected his thoroughness during daily inspections and his insistence on proper protective equipment usage. He had developed a reputation for catching safety violations that others might overlook. The project foreman, who had worked under Tobias for several months, had grown tired of what he perceived as excessive safety scrutiny. He decided to play what he considered a harmless practical joke by temporarily removing a 6-foot section of protective fencing around the excavation. According to his statement to investigators, his intention was to watch Tobias discover the apparent safety violation during his routine walkthrough. Workers had temporarily removed several safety caps earlier for alignment work and had not yet replaced them. Co-workers later told investigators that the foreman frequently joked about Tobias's strictness and underestimated the danger. As evening approached, Tobias began his customary final inspection of the construction site. This daily routine involved systematically checking various work areas, scaffolding connections, and safety installations before securing the site for the night. He carried a standard flashlight to examine areas where natural lighting had become insufficient. The excavation area had been properly marked and fenced throughout the day with barriers, warning signs, and reflective tape. However, the removed fencing section created an unmarked gap in the safety perimeter that was not immediately visible in the diminishing light conditions. While examining overhead scaffolding work near the excavation, Tobias focused his attention upward and began walking backward to get a better viewing angle of the structural connections. The foreman, positioned approximately 30 feet away, witnessed Tobias approaching the unprotected opening, but realized too late that his coworker was unaware of the missing barrier. Tobias stepped directly into the gap and fell the full 12 feet into the excavation. The bottom of the trench contained exposed steel reinforcement bars and concrete debris from ongoing utility installation work. Workers had temporarily removed several safety caps earlier for alignment work and had not yet replaced them. During his fall, he struck multiple pieces of uncapped rebar that had been left protruding from the excavation walls. The foreman immediately called emergency services and climbed down into the trench to provide assistance. He found Tobias conscious but severely injured, with obvious signs of internal trauma from the steel reinforcement bars. Emergency responders arrived and required specialized equipment to safely extract him from the confined space. During transport to the hospital, medical personnel noted signs of internal bleeding and initiated trauma protocols. Despite surgical intervention and blood transfusion efforts, Tobias succumbed to his injuries from multiple penetrating wounds that had damaged vital organs. The medical examiner determined the cause of death as hemorrhagic shock resulting from internal bleeding caused by penetrating trauma from steel reinforcement materials. The investigation documented the missing safety fencing through scene photographs and witness statements from the foreman, who admitted to removing the barriers. Criminal charges were filed against the foreman for reckless endangerment resulting in death. It was September 7th, 2017, in Chicago, Illinois, where steady rain fell throughout the evening as temperatures held at 58 degrees Fahrenheit. The third-floor apartment overlooked a busy street where regular traffic noise provided constant background sound. 24-year-old Una Bell worked as a graphic designer and had been living with her boyfriend for 3 years in what friends described as a stable relationship. Medical records would later reveal she had been managing depression and anxiety with prescribed medication, though recent dosage adjustments had been made. Colleagues knew her as creative and sensitive, someone who took personal relationships seriously. Investigation revealed that her closest friend had grown concerned about what she perceived as complacency in Una's relationship. According to the friend's statement to police, she believed that some manufactured drama might reinvigorate the couple's connection and devised a scheme to create fake evidence of infidelity. Phone records also showed she'd been drinking earlier, which may have impaired her judgment. During the early evening hours, the friend sent carefully constructed digital evidence to Una's phone, including manipulated screenshots of supposed conversations between her boyfriend and an unknown woman. She had also prepared a photograph of his car parked at a hotel, though this image had actually been taken weeks earlier during an unrelated business trip. Phone metadata later recovered by investigators showed that Una repeatedly viewed and forwarded these materials to another friend, accompanied by increasingly distressed text messages expressing shock and betrayal. The digital evidence appeared convincing enough to trigger genuine emotional distress in someone already vulnerable due to her mental health condition. Over approximately 45 minutes, Una's emotional state deteriorated rapidly as she processed what she believed was proof of her boyfriend's unfaithfulness. During this period, she made several phone calls to her boyfriend, though he was unable to immediately explain the fabricated evidence since he was unaware of its false nature. As her distress intensified, Una consumed a significant quantity of her prescribed benzodiazepine medication along with alcohol. The combination of these substances, particularly in someone already taking psychiatric medications, created a dangerous situation involving central nervous system depression. Toxicology experts noted that her recent medication adjustment made her more vulnerable to unpredictable reactions. Her boyfriend, concerned by her increasingly incoherent phone calls, drove immediately to the apartment. Upon arriving, he discovered Una unresponsive on the living room floor, with shallow, irregular breathing patterns consistent with respiratory depression from the drug and alcohol combination. Emergency medical services responded within minutes of his call for help. Paramedics documented severely depressed respiratory function and probable aspiration of stomach contents. Sedation from the drug-alcohol combination likely suppressed her gag reflex, increasing the risk of inhaling stomach contents. Standard reversal agents were considered but not administered due to the risk of seizures in mixed substance ingestions. Despite aggressive airway management and supportive care during transport and at the hospital, Una's condition continued to deteriorate. She progressed to complete respiratory failure and was pronounced dead after resuscitation efforts proved unsuccessful. The medical examiner determined the cause of death as acute combined benzodiazepine and alcohol toxicity with aspiration complications. The subsequent investigation revealed the fabricated nature of the infidelity evidence through phone data analysis. The friend who created the false materials faced criminal charges related to actions that contributed to the death. Thanks for watching. Want to watch more? Click on your screen now.